Bienvenue. Les aventures de Frank et Ben. 6e série. Frank and Ben go on a picnic with Ruth and Sally. 20e histoire. Frank and Ben go on a picnic, part 20. Frank, where are you? Back at the car with Bowser. Did you take him to the beach? Yeah. Is there any food there for me? Well, there's cheese, tomatoes, and pickles. There's also a little potato salad. What about ham? I'm afraid there's no ham. What about the bread? There's just one slice. Well, thanks for saving a little food for me. After Frank has shut off his phone and Ben puts away his, he tells the girls that his friend will be with them shortly. So what happened? Did they get killed? Asked Sally. Who? What do you mean? No, it didn't quite happen like that. The general took over the city where they lived. That's about it. Despite there being no bloodshed at the end of the story, Sally is not happy with it. She finds it depressing. She even becomes surprisingly critical and compares it to another story she has recently read. So it is that Ben is made to feel bad, not only about the small amount of food left for Frank, but about Sally's being disappointed with his story. To make things worse, Ruth starts feeding the squirrel the last slice of bread. When Ben manages to interrupt Sally long enough to tell Ruth this isn't a good idea, the older sister apologizes, gets to her feet, and picks up the martial arts stick lying on the picnic table. She then goes off to practice with it. A little while later, however, she comes back and with Ben and Sally's encouragement, demonstrates a few defensive and offensive moves. Then all three of them hear Bowser barking, and soon Frank rolls up on his bicycle. After getting off the bicycle and letting Bowser off his leash, he walks over to the picnic table and examines it. Where's the bread? He asks finally. Look, we'll take you to McDonald's, says Ruth. You can have anything you want. Yeah, it'll be our treat, says Sally. Not even a friggin' piece of bread here. What am I supposed to do? Eat lettuce and tomatoes? There's still some cheese, Frank, says Ben. Yeah, but no bread to put it on. If you hadn't taken so long, there'd still be some food here, says Ruth. Before Frank can answer her, Bowser goes over to the tree where the squirrel is and starts barking. Want a glass of pop, Frank? Asked Ben. No, I don't want a glass of pop. Ben winces at the tone his friend uses. In the meantime, Frank looks at Ruth, who's still holding the martial arts stick. Well, don't look at me as if I'm to blame, says Ruth. If it hadn't been for your dog running loose and getting into trouble, you'd have been here a long time ago. Well, let's not quarrel, says Ben. There are still some crackers here. Why don't you put cheese on them, Frank? After exchanging a rather unfriendly look with Ruth, Frank goes over to the picnic table He pokes around in some of the containers before deciding to try the camembert cheese. In the meantime, the girls decide to go off for a walk with the dog. "What's with the stick she was holding?" Frank says finally. "She uses it in her martial arts class. She was showing us some moves with it. It looks pretty dangerous. She claims she can disable a guy like you in 15 seconds. What do you mean, a guy like me? I only mean a guy who's tough like you. Not that she'd ever use it offensively, of course. It's only for defensive purposes." While the boys are having this conversation, the two sisters are having their own. At a spot overlooking the river and with some green hills in the distance, Ruth says to Sally, "I'll tell you why I think it was a mistake for me to come. It's simply that Frank and I get along about as well as a cat and a dog." "Some cats and dogs get along well." "You know what I mean." "Do you know what I mean?" "No, I don't think I do." "Well, like a cat and a dog, you might snarl at each other on occasion, but when all is said and done, you don't hurt each other." "You be so sure of that?" "I think you're basically a good person, and I think he's basically a good person. I think he basically respects you, and I think you basically respect him. So why should there be anything other than this occasional snarling?" Ruth remains silent for several seconds while Bowser comes up to her. She unconsciously pats his head. She then looks out towards the river and exclaims, "God, it's beautiful." Meanwhile, back at the picnic table, the boys start to pack things away. "By the way," says Frank, "why did you tell me there was bread here when there wasn't?" "You see that squirrel over there? He got the last of it." "From whose hand?" "From the hand of the beautiful princess with a wart on her nose." "I think you mean from the hand of the person who thought she should have an operation." Ben can only smile at this recollection of what he has just told his friend. "Now she wants to treat me like to a meal at McDonald's to get rid of her bad conscience." Just as he says this, Ruth and Sally show up with Bowser leading the way. "Oh, look," exclaims Sally, "there's our little squirrel friend." "Yes, he's getting bold," says Ruth. "He must be hungry." "I don't see how," says Frank. "He looks pretty fat to me." "Are you joking?" exclaims Ruth. "It looks like he's been fed too much from picnic tables." With her sister looking at her carefully, Ruth decides not to say anything. Instead, she goes over to the bicycles and brings one of them close to the picnic table. Then she starts loading its panniers with picnic stuff. The rest follow her example, and soon all four of them, after mounting on the bicycles, head down the hill towards the parking lot. No sooner do they arrive at their cars and put the bicycles in one of the nearby stands than, to Frank and Ben's great surprise, a car pulls up with Big Bob Slummix at the steering wheel.